A half dozen prominent Democrats are vying to replace Governor Tony Evers when his term ends. Among them is Missy Hughes, the former head of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, so we'll start with the question I've asked everyone, and it seems most of you have asked yourselves before you got into the race. Why do you want to be governor?
You know, it's really two pieces. One, Wisconsin is my home. I've had the chance over the last 6 years and before that working with farmers to really understand that across Wisconsin, folks are trying to make their communities better, trying to improve their lives. And now more than ever, we need a governor who's focused on helping folks do that, who's really thinking about how to build a strong economy, how to make sure that folks have access to good jobs, to health care and child care. And so I want to bring my experience to bear to help lead the state forward.
Let's talk about your experience. You've never held elected office before. What's your message to voters who might be worried about that as you're asking them to elect you to lead Wisconsin?
You know, as I'm talking to Wisconsinites, they're actually excited that I've never held office before. I'm not a politician. I've talked about that, and they're excited to have someone who has experience of working in communities, of helping communities move forward. But really, they're excited about someone who's not so involved in gamesmanship, in thinking about, you know, how to beat your opponent. They want somebody who's ready to work together, who's really ready to think about how can I make their lives better.
You just said it there. You don't consider yourself a politician.
Mm-hmm.
You've spent the past 6 years, though, in the Evers administration leading a department. You've held press conferences celebrating policies Governor Evers has championed. Is that not in some ways acting like a politician? You're not just coming from an office job.
Well, I'll say just from the last few weeks of having launched a campaign, running for office is very different than being in public service. It's just really what I consider WEDC to be. I was there to help advance the governor's policies, but also to really implement programs to have actual impact in people's lives.
Well, let's talk about the Democratic primary. The field is very crowded. What is your approach to differentiating yourself as voters consider a lot of candidates who share similar views?
You know, right now I'm looking and seeing myself as someone who's from outside of Madison and Milwaukee. I live in southwest Wisconsin, and I've lived there for over 25 years. And what's really important to me is I have a sense of what folks are doing in rural Wisconsin and how they're thinking about their lives. But at the same time, I've had lots of experience in Madison and Milwaukee. So I really see that I have a unique path that is outstate and also really being engaged across the state. All 72 counties have seen impact from the work that I've done, and so I want to continue that work.
What we've seen in recent years in statewide elections is that a lot of Democratic support comes from Madison, comes from Milwaukee. In some ways it makes sense. That's where a lot of the state's population is. What role do you view voters in rural Wisconsin having, first in the primary and then in the general election?
You know, all across Wisconsin, we see folks very, very engaged in understanding who their leaders are and how to move things forward. I don't often really delineate between rural and urban. I think that everyone is thinking about how to move their communities forward, how to build a strong economy, and that's where I want to meet every Wisconsinite where they are.
When you launched your campaign, you said you want to reject divisive politics. If voters elect you, how would you approach working with Republicans?
Well, over the course of the last 6 years, I've already worked with Republicans. I was confirmed unanimously twice by the Republican legislature as a secretary, and I've been able to work in districts and work with the all types of legislators in making sure that we can meet what they need.
You said earlier in this interview you think public service and running for office are different. Do you think your working relationship with Republicans would be different from what it was at WEDC if you're then the governor, the leader of their opposition party?
You know, I think that probably next year, following the election, we're going to see a different makeup of the legislature. So I don't necessarily want to jump to conclusions about what's going to happen, but I know that I've been able throughout my career to bring people to the table, to find common ground, and to find the things that we want to work on together, and to really build that muscle of collaboration and cooperation, and then we can move forward and really wrestle about the things that we need to wrestle about. But for the first part, I want to find those ways to work together.
We hear from voters so often, they're concerned about how much money they're spending. They're concerned about the economy. You've spent the last 6 years thinking about economic development. What do you think the path forward is for Wisconsin families?
You know, what we need to make sure is that we can get folks to the jobs that they have, the job opportunities that they have. Right now, we see barriers to that, whether it's taking care of your children and making sure that you have access to affordable, accessible childcare. It's about healthcare and making sure that you and your family have the healthcare they need so that you're not held back from getting to work. It's about transportation. It's about all these individual things that you need in order to show up every day and to be there for a full shift. And that's where I've really had a chance to talk not only with Wisconsinites, but also with Wisconsin businesses and the challenges that they're seeing. Wisconsin businesses are talking about childcare. They're talking about healthcare. They want these things solved too. And I think by bringing everyone together and starting to think about policies that really make sure Wisconsin workers can get to work, we're going to find some real opportunities for success.
All right, Missy Hughes, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.